the Mississippi Crop Situation Podcast featuring the Crop Doctors.
Good afternoon from the Crop Doctors Podcast studio in Stoneville. Tom and I have got Daniel Stephenson on the phone. Daniel from the LSU AgCenter, long-time friend of the podcast. Is that the right way to say that, Tom?
I think so, yeah. That's what I would go with.
So had a request last week for Daniel's expertise, and so we're going to talk about Johnsongrass today. I thought we did Johnsongrass last year. I mean, you were on here a couple times last year, weren't you, Daniel?
Yeah.
But my recollection is that maybe that was more related to
I know we
burn
did
down.
Well, I know we did ryegrass. I would have swore we did Johnsongrass at some point, but I was incorrect because I couldn't find it. So evidently that was in 2022, which means you're getting old, Tom.
Thanks for pointing that out.
Today is Eclipse Day, so we're recording this a few days in advance of dropping it.
In addition to being Eclipse Day, it is my 24th wedding anniversary, as well as my oldest daughter. She turns 23 today.
Happy anniversary, and happy birthday to Bailey.
Thanks.
Ditto.
So, if you back calculate, Bailey was one of the famous downstate babies. And I'll let Jason explain that to you later in life.
Yeah. I don't know if I know what to do with that.
It looks like he's trying to mentally unpack that right now. I'm enjoying it. I see there's almost smoke coming out of his ears. Almost.
People from Arkansas know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, people that know. The rabbit that was running around in my head was whether I was going to leave that in the podcast or take it out.
Well, we have to keep that family rating in there.
Names have been changed to protect the innocent, huh?
Hilarious.
Daniel, I believe the last time you were on, you already had your new job, still with LSU. Did we talk about that, Tom? Do you remember?
I think he might have just had the interim tag at that point.
Yeah. All right, so Daniel, tell people who you are now.
I am the Central Region Director of the LSU AgCenter, but I am still the Research Coordinator within the Research and Extension Center, and still Extension Weed Scientist. I'm doing it all right now.
Which means we had to schedule Daniel for this podcast and not just call him on the phone and said, hey, man, you want to talk about Johnsongrass? I actually had to schedule this. So my question, and I believe I asked Gore this when we had him on, when he talked about being the new head of DREC. So, Daniel, in a week's time, how many times do you think you sign your name now? The fact that you have to think about it means the number is too many.
Yeah. No, I agree. I've actually told some of my staff they just need to get a stamp for me.
We've had some people say that here, and they won't let them.
That's not an option.
No, it's not an option for me either.
But now you're avoiding the question that you hadn't given me an answer to yet.
How many times?
Yeah.
Looking for a number. You can ballpark it if you'd like.
Depends on the week, but 20?
I would have said higher.
It's not like it's 1,000, you know?
If you're signing your name 1,000 times, that becomes a maddening.
Yeah.
We've now reached a point.
Yeah, you got to step back and reevaluate your life decisions if you're signing your name that much.
Because that's a big negative in my book. Nope, sorry.
Every year we have to re-up people being able to drive, and the safety coordinator walked in with just a huge stack, 5-inch stack, 2 of them. Then I got to sign every one of them. That's when you wonder why you dislike the fact that your last name is 10 letters.
You need to shorten your signature, my friend.
That was my wife's main complaint when we got married, because she was Jones. So it's like 5 letters. She goes to 10. So now she just scribbles.
Daniel, we got a forecast for big rain this week. I know y'all do too. It doesn't look like we're going to miss this one. We're going to be out of the field more than likely for a few days, so we'll release this next week, so it'll be middle part of April by then. Already have had some questions about Johnsongrass, and some of that was just leading into the year, making a plan for Johnsongrass, and then some of it has been Johnsongrass that's actually up. So, and I'm sure y'all have some too, just with the latitude. So let's talk about Johnsongrass. And I think we've probably gone through how it got to be such a big problem again. With the resistance and the different things that it's resistant to. But maybe just touch on that briefly, the different modes of action that y'all have, populations that this particular weed's resistant to, and then we'll get into some management from there.
So we've documented as being resistant to glyphosate. We did that back in 2010. I think you guys in Mississippi did it somewhere around there, and then Arkansas was a year or so ahead of it. So it's not new. The graminicides, we're in the process of documenting that. They're beginning to sell right now. The ALS inhibitors, the ones in corn tend to do pretty well. Outside of corn, and really so invoke staple and cotton and some of the other ALS inhibitors, classic, whatever. And beans just don't seem to have much activity. For doing this work, I had a student in 11, 12, and 13. His master's was on Johnsongrass, and I did some work with Jason Norsworthy that Cotton Incorporated funded around the same time frame. To boil it all down, here's what came out of it. In corn, you could control it. You had something like Accent, or you had the product Corvus or Caprino that could control it. In beans and cotton, it was the graminicides and glufosinate, Liberty. And because, they say tripling could control it, but we hit dead. Tripling pretty much useless at that point. So I knew as 12, 13 that when we ever lost the graminicides, it was going to be tough. So that's where we are.
So when you say graminicides, which ones are you talking about?
Select and Assure.
Okay, so you got
the DIMs and the FOPs.
Both families.
Have you seen what you would consider to be a field level failure to those particular products, or you're just expecting? Okay.
Yes, we're dealing mostly with rhizome. If it's seedling Johnsongrass, I don't have any seedling. Just lay that out there. So when I tell you that, the group 15s and whatnot work on it, it's a large seeded grass, that's based off experience and training. That's not what I've seen, because I just don't see much seedling around here. It's all rhizome. And you're dealing with rhizomes that the size of my thumb. You may spray a herbicide that is translocated, but it doesn't kill the entire rhizome. And then if you any kind of tillage and you divide that rhizome up into 1 to 1.5 inch segments, you're just planting it, moving it around. Feral swine love it. They'll dig it up out of the field and eat the rhizome. I was afraid back early last decade that it was just going to run roughshod over all of Louisiana. But the perennial nature of it being rhizome, it is not, thankfully. But the guys that have it, have it.
When you're talking to somebody about Johnsongrass, how do you get around this perennial nature of it? And what I mean is, even if it's glyphosate susceptible Johnsongrass, when you're going to burn the above ground plant parts, you're going to control them, and then it's going to regrow from the rhizome. And that might occur, depending on the weather, that might occur pretty quickly. And so how do you talk to somebody about the resistant versus susceptible, and if a product works on it or not? Because it could work really well and it just regrow quickly on you.
So you asking how I say, okay, that's a resistant population versus a susceptible population?
Yeah, and that too.
You just don't get any response at all. No shift in color change, let's say from glyphosate. That's what we started seeing in 9 and 10 was, you'd have a field and you got these, everybody can imagine these clumps of Johnsongrass that'll be out in the field, and within 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet of each other, they may be one that's brown, where you've killed all the above ground, and then right beside it's pretty and green. Typical resistance. Then you'll have a little bit of kind of range in there from where they'll, they get sick, then they recover. We've never documented the mechanism of resistance here at LSU. We just don't have the capacity to do that. How do I tell a guy? If you've got it and you must perform tillage of some sort, practice sanitation, and clean off your equipment before you leave the field to make sure you're not carrying any rhizomes with you. If there's a way that you don't have to till it, so you can kind of move it toward a no-till, then you can go in and maybe focus in those spots. I did some work around the same time frame, early last decade, where I tried to target it in the fall to see if I could, just based off the plant getting ready for the winter, maybe it's moving more sugars and everything down to the rhizome, getting ready to overwinter. And I think it was like 65, average temperature 65, 75, and 85. And I put out a series of treatments, and they ended up being 3 weeks apart. What I essentially found the next fall when these plots regreened up is I was unsuccessful at doing anything. And I looked at LS inhibitors, I looked at the ACCase, so the graminicides, I looked at Liberty, Roundup, obviously, and was not successful. I was hoping, what's that old time they say about the nudibranch, Jason? About 3 weeks before first frost, or buckwheat, actually, red vine. Get out there and spray it with dicamba about 3 weeks before first frost. That's kind of what I was trying to do with Johnsongrass. Just really didn't find it to be successful. So honestly, if you got it and it's resistant, just try to manage it and keep it in that one little area of a field and not let it spread. Because tillage is going to spread it. You're on a disc, you're going to spread it. You're on hippers, you're going to spread it.
So you and I have talked about that fall treatment, and I've suggested people use it, and then I've gone back and qualified it, or maybe I suggested they not use it and then gone back and qualified it and maybe suggested they try it just to see if it works. Because from what I recall from the conversation you and I had, there was a possibility that it wasn't late enough. Just the years that you tried that, the frost didn't cooperate. And it could be you do it different years and get very different results. And I think for any of us, we're far south enough that trying to time something on a frost is just not terribly reliable. I mean, sometimes we can with that red vine treatment, but man, to do that reliably year in and year out, it's a moving target.
That's why I tried to time it with a, average 24-hour temperature. Probably should have gone down to 55. Didn't work out. I tried. You
mentioned trifluralin.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that and why that doesn't work for us in 2024.
Doesn't work. It didn't. I don't think it would work in this state. 24, 14, 04, 94, because we hit roads. Coming where I come from, where everything's flat, you can actually properly incorporate trifluralin because it is volatile. Once you get it properly incorporated, it does a great job. Here, when you hip, so if you spread it on flat ground and re-hip it, you probably concentrated on the top of the road. Wouldn't you think, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that it's not a viable treatment, and I just wanted to discuss why it's not. Yeah, I think there's a multitude of reasons. The beds and concentrating in the bed, even if you increase the rate to account for throwing it up in that row, you don't have an even herbicide layer across there for sure, because I don't think you'll have any in the middles. And if that clump happens to come up through the middle, well, it's just as problematic there as far as maintaining that population and reproducing for future years as it would be if it was on top of the row. Maybe not give you that yield loss due to competition when it's up on the row, but I don't think a hipper, again, even with an increased rate, does a good job. And then for us on flat ground, I even think that we don't have a disc that is appropriate for incorporating anymore. I think most of our discs, the pans are too big on it and they throw too much dirt to really do a proper job of incorporating. When we do it occasionally in plots, like for ryegrass or something, on flat ground, we do a treatment. So very small area, we use a rolling basket, and that works great. Loose dirt and then run a rolling basket over it works great for incorporating herbicide treatment, but that's not realistic on any kind of scale.
See, I can remember growing up, we take a moldboard plow and flip the dirt over, break it, and then have a belly boom on a tractor, spraying Sonaland or Treflan or something. And then we call it a field cultivator. It was just a series of just small tines of small shovels on them and a couple of rolling baskets on the back.
Yeah.
So, you were scratching it maybe 2 inches deep. You were running it pretty light.
Right.
Really to bust up the clods that the mobile plow flipped over and then to put out that herbicide. No, that's just not a practice that is utilized in the Mid-South.
So the post-treatments, I guess go through corn first.
So if I'm standing on a turn row with a guy and I know he's got Johnsongrass problems, the first bullet I'm going to go to is Caprino. I like Caprino. It's fine carbazole methyl and Laudis. They don't sell the TCM alone. I really like that product. The AgCenter Nicosulfuron performs pretty well. Guys will call me because Caprino will be high. They'll want to go a cheaper route. The AgCenter will work for you, but still, Caprino is more broad spectrum than AgCenter. That's one of the benefits of it. We sprayed a bunch of Caprino here on the research station in corn today for Johnsongrass control. That and some atrazine and glyphosate. They'll pick up anything else. Could have used Liberty instead, but not all my corn's Liberty tolerant. That's my first go-to would be Caprino and corn. And then the next would be Corvus and then AgCenter. And then notice I'm done. That's it.
Yeah.
That's what's scary. Because we're just fighting it with those, two different families of ALS inhibitors, but it is what it is.
Well, and didn't you say there were some populations that were ALS resistant?
Well, we'll get to that when we get into cotton. What we've seen, Tom, is when we were trying Invoke and Staple, which when we get to the cotton section, we'll talk about that.
We'll do that. Broadleaf row crops, what are our options?
In the work that Norrisworthy and I did, we looked at program approach, so almost like the original Pigweed Pro. Reflex 2 weeks before planting, Conran behind the planter, Liberty, and then some Staple. And so we added in Staple and Invoke in their post-treatments. We did a pretty good job of knocking it back there, but I laid most of that weight on Liberty, and here's why. Because we had another study where we looked at Invoke and Staple kind of in sequential applications, and it didn't do worth a flip. I mean, they just really, you'd see a little bit of yellowing, but not much. We had other trials where we looked at Liberty mixed with clethodim or Select. Really good results on that, and actually found that the bigger the Johnsongrass, the better the activity from Liberty. So kind of concurrently, I had a student working on it, and by the time Liberty linked soybeans and cotton, and we started him out in his cotton work, kind of timing it 2 weeks after planting, 4 weeks after planting, and then kind of did different 2 or 3 weeks after the initial. So it had you may have a 2 week followed by 4 week, 2 week followed by 5 week, 4, 6, 4, 7. And then we did three applications of glufosinate. In each instance, we found that we were able to harvest the crop by doing that, 2 to 3 applications of Liberty. And Select was in there too. So what that eventually told me in cotton and soybean, that we really had the ACCS inhibitors, so the graminicides, Select, Assure, or we had Liberty. So now in those 3 crops, I've got a couple of ACCS inhibitors or ALS inhibitors in corn, Caprino, Corvus, and AgCenter, Liberty, and graminicides. It's a lot like what you did with ryegrass, Jason, where you looked at a bunch of stuff and kind of came down to just a few things that's going to work.
Now your grass herbicides are on the slippery slope too.
Yeah.
So then you're down to Caprino and Liberty.
Yeah, because what happened here is they were pounding it with really mostly clethodim. All they would do is they just up the rate. The bigger the Johnsongrass got, they'd up the rate even more, which I could support. So it just began to fail. So thankfully, a lot of the problems in central Louisiana, so right around the research station, which is the epicenter for us here, Jim Griffin actually discovered it down in Irwinville, which is near Baton Rouge. Those areas are mostly in sugarcane. So they have Invoke and Agilam down there in cane. But I'm getting more calls from Concordia, Catahoula, beginning to move up the Delta parishes in the northeast part of the state of where these individuals are having problems controlling Johnsongrass. The graminicides seem to still be working there, but it won't take long. Well, maybe 10 years before it started slipping real bad.
With that number of limited products, then what's your hypothetical rotational strategy if you're rotating host crops so that you basically change up your herbicide chemistries then making those applications? Because it doesn't sound like that's really much of an option.
If I'm in a cotton soybean rotation, I don't have many options. I'm going to suggest to the grower that they put corn in that rotation. And if they rotate in there with corn, the Johnsongrass does not see any clethodim or quasalophyte, Mature Select. Most likely doesn't see any Liberty. It just sees Caprino. And we've gotten some season-long control with Caprino. It does a really good job. And that was honestly found by mistake. I planted some corn in a field that was like a you could have cut Johnsongrass for hay, and I sprayed it, and I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? So rotate corn into it. That's the best way to manage this pest, is to have corn in rotation.
So in that dedicated broadleaf crop acre with cotton, that Liberty tolerance comes with cotton now. I mean, most of our varieties are Extend Flex, Enlist. They're both going to have that tolerance to Liberty. Soybeans, different story. We still have some Extend varieties that don't have the Liberty tolerance. What do you do in that case? I mean, there's nothing you can do besides use Select or Assure, right? That's what your option is,
right.
And it either works or it doesn't. All right, what about timing? At least what is your target timing? Because the thing grows so fast. Often by the time we go out with our first post-treatment in beans or cotton, the Johnsongrass is 2 feet tall a lot of times.
4 inches if it's rhizome. If you're using a graminicide, that's the time to target it. Liberty, you can let it get up 8, 12, 16 inches because I just think there's more biomass there to intercept the glufosinate, and it works really well. And Extend beans are non-glufosinate tolerant soybean. That's where you must use Assure Select 4 inches, and you can mix that with your glyphosate when you're going across the field. We've done that many times. Mixing it with dicamba is not really that big of a deal. One time I think Steckel was replacing glyphosate with clethodim because of the volatility issue. I know that's been solved. And then more than likely, you're going to have to come back and do another application unless you're going narrow soybeans. The biggest thing is tillage, guys. So if you got a 100-acre field there and you got 3 or 4 clumps, so yeah, they're the size of a truck, but 3 or 4 clumps. If you go out there and you're plowing across that field, those clumps are going to continue to get bigger. So you're just going to spread those rhizomes, assuming it's rhizome Johnsongrass, which more than likely it is. So targeting those spots and going out, and if you got a spot spray, go in there and just treat it like that. That was what a lot of growers were doing in corn 10 years ago. They were, rather than broadcasting Caprino was the choice they generally used, they were going into spot spraying because they knew where they were. They dropped their GPS point on them. They went to the field and they sprayed those spots because they're not going to move. It's not like a pigweed.
Because it's real common to see the ryegrass around here creeping off the roadside. You see it start, in proximity to the road one year, and then if you keep up with it, it'll creep and creep and creep on you. And that's moving with the tillage equipment. It's moving with combines and different things. It's got a really stiff straw.
If after you harvest a crop, there's enough time before the first frost and the Johnsongrass regrows, you can go out, and really tough to say what to do because not everything's legal at that time. I've heard growers talk about it, just going in and just mow it, those little patches, and just keep mowing it with the hopes of wearing out to quote the farmer who told me this. He said, I'm just going to wear them rhizomes out. That was pretty smart. So that's a good way to do it. Farmers who have Johnsongrass, it's aggravating and it's tough, particularly if they're spreading through a field. But it's not like it's moving a county or a parish a year. It's not moving that fast. It's a slow mover, which I'm thankful for. We just don't have a lot of tools to manage it.
Daniel, we appreciate your time this afternoon. Really important topic, and definitely something I think that farmers will consider throughout the year.
Good. My pleasure.
Thanks, buddy. I always enjoy it.
Thank you, Jay.
The Mississippi Crop Situation Podcast is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.